everybody, Jeff Katz back with you. Hope you're all doing well. This is an episode of The Underground I've been looking forward to revisiting because I haven't seen any of this since it first locked. But as we've talked a couple times through this, The Underground takes place in the exact same universe as the WRP show. So in this sort of fictionalized, Warriors-esque version of Los Angeles, you would have the WRP going on at night in one corner and the Underground in its own different corner, and the idea eventually could be that someone could graduate from the Underground and maybe eventually end up in the WRP Fight Club, in the bully pulpit, as we called it. And so from the very beginning, when I got approached by Awesomeness and Google and YouTube to do this, all along the idea was that it took place in the same universe as WRP. I retain, in fact, all the rights creatively and all this stuff, so if I ever did, figures or whatever, not that I'm going to, but that I could do all of these characters still. You would just have the Young Bucks as PW3 and Stone, and they exist in the same world where Kenny Omega is Cornerstone Scott Carpenter, and Chris Hero is Chris Hyde, and Luther is Father Dante, and so on and so forth. And in fact, it's one of the things when I've talked about on an older commentary about a year or maybe a little less than a year before AEW launched. I got a call from my agent that they had a request for me to sit down with a production company in town about a wrestling project. I did not particularly want to go do it because it was not something wrestling was not something I was obviously super hot to return to for obvious reasons. But I ended up going and meeting with them, and it ended up being a production company that's owned by Tony Khan, and they were going to run the production end of what would become AEW. And in fact, they are run by a guy named Bernie Cahill, who I've known for years through his old company Roar, and I put Quentin Rampage Jackson, who was a client of his, in the A-Team, and I've done business with Bernie over the years, quite like him a lot. But when I talked to the AEW guys, the one thing I told them was the value of make sure you create some guys that you own, that are you're not bringing in just names from other places and you don't own that IP. And I will say that, it's been borne out in the sense that, even though my stuff ultimately wasn't as commercially successful, or, obviously with WRP's case, super complicated in terms of my dropping the ball there, I still own all that IP, and it's IP that eventually could be leveraged, and it's got value in that, and I do think that's the value of having, this is not Joey Ryan, this is Chase Walker. He is, the gay baby face. He's out and proud after his WRP storyline. In fact, when I brought Joey in to do this, he was joking around. He had shaved the mustache, and we said, that's okay. The mustache was a symbol of you staying in the closet. This is you now, out and proud. And so, as I was saying, speaking to both the WRP Underground being in the same universe and the idea of owning and creating your own unique characters and having a universe separate from all other wrestling and its own little pocket corner thing, David Lynch style at a certain level, is having, this is not MVP, this is the Lord of War. I also have to say that of any character from WRP, the one I'd probably most want to revisit is the Lord of War. I love the character. I love the Chono-esque sort of stuff. MVP and I both big fans of that era of Chono. And I love MVP personally, as we've talked about a lot. We talk frequently, and I think we've gotten even closer in the years after this. But I think in a lot of ways, if you go back and look at the WRP show and the way that I used the Tommy Lee Ridgway and Muncie McGee storyline with Pat Buck and Adam Pearce, that was about bipartisanship and working together and kind of almost Pollyanna-ish in a certain way. Well, the Lord of War was much more about a commentary on the darker aspects of the country and some of my more complicated views, which in some cases I think MVP shares. And I think as time has gone on, I've gotten much more savvy to, I've now read about the Dulles brothers. I've learned much more about sort of the, Gulf of Tonkin, sort of the crazy sort of, the things they don't teach you in terms of corporate media or necessarily a history class in high school. And I think that the world, in a lot of ways, has moved to a place where Lord of War as a character would be really interesting to utilize. I like Lord of War, by the way. He's a mercenary, and I do, true to his character here, he's not going to, he's here for hire. He was paid to do a job, take his money and run. He's not here to listen to Jobs' mouth off. And that's, in both cases, the way these characters are performed are consistent with their characters in WRP if you go watch them. So we have that continuity. But as I was saying, I just think the world, just given everything that's gone on and how much more savvy I think people are to sort of even seeing through the right and left paradigm, which is pretty illusory at this point, that there is almost a a top-tier ruling class and were being played against each other. There's a lot you could do to make that character. He'd almost become a babyface, weirdly, today. The only babyface that he'd be able to unite, like the Bernie Sanders voters and the Alex Jones and like Trump people alike. It would be a very interesting populist character now. But it just shows you how much the world has changed. And to that end, too, when you look at the Joey Ryan of it all, like I've talked a bunch about the idea. I don't believe in memory holding people. Like, do I think Bill Cosby's a great guy? Obviously not. Do I think Bill Cosby himself is a brilliant piece of comedic material? Yes, I absolutely do. Like, I can separate art from artist. I encourage people to be able to do that. I would say as someone who's worked in Hollywood with a lot of celebrities, like, you better do that or you're not going to like a lot of the people that you're fans of. But also, like, having worked with Joey several times, like, I like Joey personally, and I'm sorry to see what went down go down. And I hope he's doing okay, because I personally speaking, I know what it feels like to feel like you've been thrown into the corner and if you're in a hole, and how do you dig yourself out of it. And so I don't excuse any bad behavior, and if anything illegal was done, that obviously has to be looked at and adjudicated. But otherwise, like, I hope he is doing okay. And I don't, when I look at the Squared Circle Reddit, where I get a lot of my news now, it is interesting. Like, it's almost become like politics, the harshness with which, oh, fuck that guy, I hate that guy, this guy disagrees with me. I wish in some ways we could tone that down. I understand in this case, this blew up into a huge internet thing and was part of when I originally came back to do these commentaries in the first place. But as we revisit it here, I would always encourage people, to try to separate art from artist. You can appreciate Chris Benoit's work well at the same time. I think in a lot of ways that informs my view, is knowing Benoit as well as I did, considering him a friend. Like, I can watch WrestleMania 20 and I can separate it in that moment from what I know happens in the end. And I understand if you can't, but I would encourage people, I think, as a consumer in some ways to do that. And now on a lighter note, here's Luther beating the shit out of Steve Jobs. As we said many times, and this is in keeping with my Lord of War evolution, now, today this character would be named Bill Gates. Or Klaus Schwab, perhaps. Like, to give you I'm at this point, I'm like a JFK liberal at this point, I would say, but my bullshit meter in terms of like corporate governmental fusions of power is very, very low. And that is something that MVP and I have very entertaining conversations on many times. To be a fly on the wall of that one. I'm curious now if YouTube will even let me post this, considering my criticism of a couple of those people. But I do say, looking back at this, I haven't watched a full AEW show yet, as we talked, and I think now I'm going to do an Ask Me Anything thing with the Squared Circle guys coming up, and I think we're going to try to do it around me watching my first full AEW show. The only thing I don't quite get, and they look like they're doing great, obviously, and I know the CM Punk stuff's been a huge success, is whenever I see the clips on the show, like, they're still all using, like, everyone's their indie character. Like, they don't own, there's no Undertaker. Like, they need a couple of those guys that they own outright. Just as a long-term pieces of licensing, real estate, etc. That's going to sound like a really trite critique, and in some ways it is, but I do think it's important just as a business move, because you're going to end up making guys that, you've invested to make their names bigger and bigger that can then go elsewhere and draft off the work, and, that's fine, but in a couple cases I think you'd like to at least control a little of that. Otherwise, though, not much you could critique. It seems like things are going well, and I think I'm at the point now where I'm curious, particularly now with Christian getting pushed at a high level, to come and finally take in one of their shows in full, and so I think we're going to do that pretty soon too. There's a European uppercut, although again in that case that's probably a Northern Californian uppercut, as he's Steve Jobs. If that was Muncie McGee, as you know, if you watch WRP, that would be a Midwestern uppercut. And now here we go. And I like Famous B, I want to put over a bit, because I really enjoyed working with this guy. I am almost 100% sure he did go on to do some Lucha Underground stuff after that. He bridged the underground universes, I suppose. And now, as you can see, by the way, MVP kind of maybe looking at, do I take the money and run here? I don't know if I like the way this thing is breaking. Yes, MVP, I think, clearly now calculating his exit, perhaps, from the situation. But Famous B, all of these guys, great attitudes, really good snug work. But I really enjoyed working with Famous B. I'm glad to see that he got to do some additional stuff behind this. And oh no, shades of Rick Martel and Tito Santana at WrestleMania 5, minus the prior flying forearm to piss off Rick Martel. And oh, we got a double super kick. Gimmick infringement, although not in the case of Chase Walker. And so there we go now. The worlds have collided. And in all these cases, again, consistent with their characters. This is a very Lord of War move.
Hold on, this may not be over yet. What?
And basically Lord of War.
Wait a minute.
As you can see,
Are you kidding me?
a babyface who actually outsmarts a heel. What a crazy concept.
And it looks like he did.
Luther had it in the bag from the beginning. The Lord of War, the ultimate mercenary.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Lord of
Getting
War
paid twice.
Double agent.
Didn't have to do much bumping. With love, that's a Kevin Nash special, and I think Kevin would agree. That's a good deal.
And Luther explaining to Chase Walker, I guess this was the plan.
And revisiting this, I have to say, I actually really like this because you do not. It's in a lot of ways, baby faces are just often booked to be so stupid. They are just such idiots, and I hate it as a viewer because you're just 5 steps ahead of them. It makes you not respect the baby face. Like if you're gonna root for someone, you want to respect. You only root for Han Solo or Indiana Jones or Snake Plissken or pick your guy because they're smart and they're ahead of the other guy. There's a rebellious sort of thinking man's clever edge to them, and I think in wrestling that's missed way too often. It's like Bret Hart with the chest plate when he got speared by Goldberg. Like, let's see baby faces do. Of course Bret Hart's going to get over doing that because it looks like he was way ahead of the other guy. Anyway, we'll get into that another time as we now see what is essentially a go-home promo, because we're going to go through what next week is when we go through that episode, which is a slightly unique thing. But in this case, PW3 and Stone back together, Liz with them, and now the fight is on. The jackpot and control of the underground against King and Dread with Shayna in their corner. The Bucks are back in town, as they say.